This is Kelly Gissender, born February 13, 1968. In 1989, she met Douglas Gissender, a reliable man who represented everything she thought she wanted. They got married on September 2nd. Their first marriage was in turmoil as financial pressure mounted and bills accumulated. Douglas joined the Army and was sent to Germany. While he was away, Kelly became pregnant by another man. In 1993, Kelly and Douglas got divorced. In May 1995, barely 2 years after their divorce, Kelly and Douglas remarried. While Douglas was serving overseas in the military, Kelly racked up debt. When he returned, she made a habit of disappearing for days. In 1995, Kelly met Greg Owens. And by November 1996, Kelly had convinced Greg they could only be together on the condition that Douglas was out of the picture. Kelly brought Greg to her house and armed him with a nightstick and a hunting knife. That night, Kelly went out drinking with friends. Everyone who saw her at the party would later confirm her presence. When Douglas returned home, Greg was waiting in the darkness. According to report, Greg struck Douglas in the head with the nightstick. The blow rendered Douglas unconscious but not dead. Greg forced Douglas to a wooden area, then he stabbed him in the neck and back multiple times. According to Greg, Kelly arrived at the crime scene, helped him dispose of the body, and burned the car. On February 7, 1997, Douglas' burned-out car was discovered in a wooded area. By February 20th, his dead body was found in the mud covered with leaves. It only took police a couple of weeks to cut to the truth. According to Kelly, she was at a party that night and she had no contact with Greg. But the investigation would later establish that Kelly called and texted Greg at least 47 times. Greg cracked under pressure and confessed every detail of the murder, including Kelly's manipulation and her involvement in helping him get the murder weapon and disposing of the body. On February 25, 1997, Kelly was arrested for the murder of her husband. During Kelly's trial, Greg testified against her. Kelly was ultimately found guilty and sentenced to death, while Greg Owen was sentenced to life in prison with possibility of parole after 25 years. On September 2015, at about 7 p.m., Kelly faced execution. She requested her final meal, cheese dip with chips, Texas fajita nachos, and a diet frosted lemonade. By 12:21 a.m., September 30, 2015, Kelly was pronounced dead by lethal injection. Kelly cried, prayed, sang Amazing Grace, and said, "I love you, Sally, and I love you, Susan. Let my kids know I went out singing Amazing Grace." Her final words were, "Bless you all. Tell the Gissenders I'm so sorry that an amazing man lost his life because of me. If I could take it all back, I would." Kelly Gissender became the first woman to be executed in Georgia since 1945.
There are so many things that I don't know and I don't have answers to, but there are some things that I do know, and that I know that if a jury knew, that they would have come to a different decision.
On April 7, 1987, 3 members of the Newton family was found shot dead in their Houston apartment. A 23-year-old husband, Adrian Newton, a 7-year-old son, and a 20-month-old daughter, all killed with a .25 caliber. The only survival, Frances Newton, stood to collect $100,000 in life insurance policies she had purchased 1 month earlier. Frances Newton made herself the sole beneficiary of a $50,000 life insurance policy on herself, her husband, and her daughter. Frances later claimed she forged Adrian's signature to prevent him from discovering the insurance purchases, allegedly to protect money she had set aside for the premiums.
The insurance had nothing to do with anything. I got that for a savings plan. Claudia said she told him that, but it was made to be out of a big deal. 6 months prior, she had talked to me about the insurance. My dad had talked to me about insurance. I don't know. I don't feel like J.J. Freeze himself had anything to do with that, but somewhere in the course of things, yeah, I think the police decided, okay, well, let's not talk about this and let's, build this up.
According to Frances' initial statement to police, she had left the apartment earlier on the day of the murder, accompanied by her cousin. When they returned, they discovered an unimaginable horror as her husband, son, and daughter lay dead in the apartment. The murder weapon was traced to a .25 caliber pistol belonging to a man Frances Newton had been romantically involved with. 13 days after the discovery of the bodies, Frances Newton was arrested and charged with capital murder. The murder weapon was the biggest link to Frances, as her fingerprint was found on it.
What I know is that Sergeant Freeze told my father when he came to get me from my parents' house that there were 2 guns in the state's possession, and the gun that I had wasn't the murder weapon. He told my father I would be back for that reason. Ron Mock, when I was first arrested and began going to court, he told us that there were 2 guns in the state's evidence, and the gun that I had wasn't the murder weapon. As far as the ballistics test coming back, saying that the gun in the state's evidence is the murder weapon, I don't know. It may be, but what I know is that the gun I had the day that I left my apartment is not the murder weapon.
During her trial, despite Frances maintaining her innocence, the jury spent barely 4 hours deliberating before convicting Frances. Frances' execution was initially scheduled for December 1, 2004, but 2 hours before her scheduled execution, Governor Rick Perry granted a 30-day stay for further investigation. Despite further investigation, Frances was convicted and rescheduled to be executed on September 14, 2005. The final hours of Frances Newton's life began at dawn. She was offered the traditional last meal, but Frances declined it. 2 hours earlier, Frances was transferred to the death chamber holding cell. She was allowed to speak with family members by telephone during this final hours. At 6 p.m., Frances was strapped to the death chamber. When asked if she wished to make a final statement, she quietly said no and shook her head. The lethal injection procedure began immediately. Frances briefly turned her head to make eye contact with her family members in the witness viewing area, nervous as she stared blankly at the ceiling. Then she turned towards the witness room as she mouths inaudible words. Whatever she attempted to communicate remains unknown. About 22 minutes past 6 p.m., after 18 years of maintaining her innocence, Frances was finally pronounced dead, becoming the first African-American woman executed in Texas since the resumption of executions.
The freedom in it when I was forgiven and I experienced that forgiveness, it freed me up inside to soar. It freed me up inside to go higher and to go deeper with the Lord. But when we're holding unforgiveness, we're blocking communication and intimacy with the Lord.
This is Karla Faye Tucker facing execution after 15 years on death row. On June 13, 1983, Tucker decided to rob Jerry Lynn Dean, accompanied by Daniel Ryan Garrett. Tucker and Daniel walked into Jerry's apartment, but Jerry wasn't alone. He was with Deborah Ruth Thornton. Jerry was asleep in his bed. Deborah was beside him, both unaware of the danger that looms. Tucker and Daniel initially moved around the apartment quietly, gathering what they could steal. Then Jerry woke up and heard movement in his apartment. Jerry made a gubbling noise, trying to wake up fully. Tucker heard him. She immediately grabbed a 3-foot pickaxe in the apartment. She attacked Jerry with the pickaxe, striking him multiple times. Deborah woke up to witness Jerry's murder. Tucker attacked her with a pickaxe, striking her multiple times too. Then Tucker and Daniel took their time to steal all they could before fleeing the scene. It didn't take long before Jerry and Deborah's lifeless body was discovered by Jerry's co-worker. He alerted the police, and investigation began immediately. The breakthrough on the case came from Tucker's own mouth. She couldn't stop bragging about the murders to friends. Tucker and Daniel were arrested. While in police custody, Tucker continued to confess. She later admitted that killing gave her sexual pleasure, and the violence excited her. Tucker showed no empathy for the victims. Daniel also confessed his role. On July 1984, Tucker was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death by lethal injection. Tucker became the youngest woman on Texas death row. She was only 24 years old. In 1995, Tucker married Dana Brown, a prison minister who had counseled her for almost 10 years.
People were looking after not just mine, but both of ours best, what they thought was our best interest, by saying, you're not going to be able to touch, and you're not going to be able to love and squeeze one another, and you're not going to be able to be there all the time for one another. But God had put something so deep in our heart that it was just unmistakable.
Did you ever believe that there was a man like Dana and that he would choose to love you?
No, I never, in my wildest dreams, could have imagined. I didn't even know how to pray for somebody that wonderful, even knowing the...
Tucker was scheduled to be executed on February 3rd. Her last meal request was a banana, a fresh peach, and a garden salad with ranch dressing. Tucker spent her final hours in prayers. She wrote final letters to family members. At 5 p.m., the final procedure began. Tucker was moved to the holding cell adjacent to the execution chamber. Her final words were, "I'd like to say to all of you, the Thornton family and the Jerry Deans family, that I'm so sorry. I hope God will give you peace with this." She turned to her husband and said, "Baby, I love you." At 6:45 p.m., Tucker was pronounced dead.
If you find this video enlightening, kindly give it a thumbs up and subscribe.